by for mode 1 Charlie 17. Mark, mode 1 Charlie.
And the flight dynamics officer says we look good on all sources, right on the trajectory. Crew will experience maximum G-forces of about 4 Gs at shutdown. Coming up on first stage shutdown. I think we saw them all from here.
Roger, Jack. The thrust is going, all 5 up there. Running good. Roger, 17, here, go.
Greetings. My name is Steve Muhammad, and I am the president and founder of Knowledge for Life. Knowledge for Life is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and our mission is to bring relevant news and information to the Black community via multimedia. You are watching one of the productions of Knowledge for Life called Knowledge Cypher, Black Mental Health Matters. We host this mental health program once a month, every third Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As a disclaimer, this program is for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for mental advice or seeking professional help through therapy or other treatments. Thank you for watching. Please like us and give us a thumbs up on YouTube, and like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Also, join our Patreon account at patreon.com/KnowForLife, where you'll get exclusive videos, promotional material like t-shirts and coffee mugs for as little as $3 a month. And this will help us to produce quality programs that will help to inspire, encourage, and motivate our people into wellness. Thank you once again for watching Knowledge for Life, Black Mental Health Matters. And now on with the program.
As we get a little closer to winter, you probably noticed it yesterday, enjoying the nice weather.
Oh, sure did.
Those days are getting shorter, aren't they?
It got dark early, and for some people this time of year might lead to something called seasonal affective disorder. So what does this mean for families, especially in the midst of a pandemic?
It's the first day of fall, and while it's a beautiful time to watch the colors change, yes, it's going to get darker outside earlier, and those temperatures, they are going to plummet. And with the change of season, sometimes comes seasonal depression. And add that into an ongoing pandemic, it's important to keep your mental health right now top of mind.
According to the Mayo Clinic, seasonal affective disorder, or S.A.D, is a type of depression that's related to the change of seasons. Symptoms include having low energy, changes in your weight or appetite, or feeling sluggish or agitated.
Experts are warning about a looming mental health crisis in the United States resulting from the national lockdown and fears pertaining to the pandemic. But those concerns are widening with the added pressure of social injustice, and doctors are seeing more and more Black Americans, already a community that experiences health disparities, reporting anxiety and depression at higher levels.
Shorter days and less sunlight can affect your mood. That's why we see seasonal affective disorder more in the winter and fall months than we do in the summer and spring.
These are not, they are not fulfilling times spiritually, you know. So I know that I am dealing with some form of low-grade depression, not just because of the quarantine, but because of the racial strife.
Once this is over, is said and done, all of us will be
I had one shift where I saw about 84 patients.
The first 21 days, we had to work consecutively without an off day. These are 12, 13-hour shifts.
You know, I do 7 days in a row of 12-hour shifts in the ICU. That's all COVID patients.
Explosive growth of new coronavirus infections.
Add on a global pandemic, the pressure is sending more than a third of Americans into a state of clinical depression and overwhelming anxiety.
Good evening. Welcome to the Knowledge for Life series in Cypher. This evening, we're going to discuss, have a discussion around seasonal affective disorder. It's kind of gone by a number of different names, so we'll kind of parse into that and really expand from there and get into a number of wellness discussions as it relates to depression and keeping ourselves physically, mentally well over this period of time. I am Dr. Melvin Hinton. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. As Brother Muhammad said at the beginning, we're going to be talking about this disorder, and it is an actual disorder. But we're not going to be diagnosing anyone. We're not going to be a substitute for anyone seeing their physician or mental health professional. Certainly, if you feel like you have any mental distress, any mental health challenges, we certainly advise that you seek out the proper consultation from the proper professionals. So what do we call seasonal affective disorder? Some people have referred to it in the past as S.A.D. Some people have referred to it as the winter blues. But what really is it? It is a form of depression, of major depression, kind of on a reoccurring pattern. It is something serious. It is not just I'm feeling bad, I'm kind of down. It is a repeated, persistent pattern of depression. We'll kind of get into what that means in a bit. It's gone by a couple different names: depressive disorder with seasonal patterns. It's gone by mood disorder with seasonal pattern. Certainly seasonal affective disorder. Certainly the winter blues. But again, it is something that is real. About 5% of adults in the U.S., and that's a rough estimate, experience some form of major depression with this kind of seasonal pattern. That number, that prevalence rate, seems to be consistent for adult African Americans as well. It is important to note this particular disorder is different from someone who says, boy, I'm feeling really down because I got laid off, or, I can't find work this time of year, or, school is really getting to me this time of year. That's a little bit different. And it's important to kind of make that distinction. So you can't kind of say I have a seasonal depression because I've got some life circumstance challenges that's specific to this time of year. There is a pattern, an onset of depression. It could be other things, could be some mood disorders, could be feelings, kind of euphoria. People call that mania. This could happen, but it's most common in major depression around the winter months. It can occur in the summer. It's much, much less common, but it can occur in the summer as well. But it is specific around that changes as the our exposure to sunlight, speaking of the winter, typically decreases around this time. Some people really can have some depressive effects. It lends us to overeating, to weight gains, cravings, to feelings of extreme fatigue, feelings of worthlessness, feelings of sadness. It really is a depressive type of feeling. So what do you do when you have major depression, when it's recurrent, when it's happening? And I should also add that this is kind of consistent over a 2-year period, right? So you got to have some time for your clinician, for your health professional to really diagnose this, right? There should be a 2-year pattern where people can say, yes, between this month and this month, I'm feeling, really down, overeating, feeling lethargic, having feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, so on and so forth. Once they do that, that's really a defining criteria. But what can you do about it, right? So if you fall into the 5%, of adults in this country that experience a seasonal affective disorder or major depression disorder with seasonal patterns. What can you do? It's actually treatable. The use of medications, the use of talk therapy, the use of something called light therapy, where you literally will have about 20 minutes or so that you sit in front or under pretty intensive light, filtering out UVs and things of that nature, but kind of mimics that vitamin D input that we get naturally from the sun. Certainly talk therapy and kind of the most effective treatment for this is a combination of all of those. So including wellness, of course. So that's a quick overview. I'd like to bring in Dr. Swift, Dr. McClure to kind of add on to kind of an overview of the seasonal pattern, major depressive disorder with seasonal pattern, and expand the topic.
Well, I can kind of jump in. We also have a new person with us today, Sister Nicole, and perhaps you can introduce yourself. My name is Dr. Monique Swift. I hail from New Jersey, and thank you, Dr. Melvin, for setting the table for us today to have this discussion. It's timely, if I can say, because this is where we are. And I think it's most timely because not only are we in the season of S.A.D, right, but we're also, we're experiencing that in the context of COVID. And so what we're seeing is already there's been an uptick, a significant uptick. I've seen up to 3 times the amount of anxiety and depression that we were seeing last year, we're seeing this year. And now we're into, so there's COVID, there's like the natural, level of how we are functioning with certain levels of anxiety and depression. Now we have COVID on top of it. So we are seeing a compounding of stressors that are creating this, what we are calling seasonal affective disorder, depression, and then anxiety also corresponds with that as well.
Dr. McClure, any opening thoughts on that?
Yes, as Dr. Monique mentioned, thank you for us. In addition to your clinical understanding and Dr. Swift as well, is just adding that, yes, it is a season of S.A.D and a season of celebration in the sense that we are in the midst of these kind of American holidays that people find themselves in, between Thanksgiving and Christmas time, plus a number of anniversaries that people might have around this time of year, in addition to the pieces of COVID, the political season that we find ourselves in, and just the general wrestling with life, the telework, if people are teleworking, or some people are out of work where they did not find themselves necessarily out of work last year's time. So I know people are dealing perhaps with things in fall of 2020, fall, winter 2020, that they definitely were not dealing with at the same time last year. So I kind of enter this conversation being aware of the intensity around those anniversary dates. And if people have any traumas and family system issues around the same time period, it could definitely spike, and seasonal affective disorder finds itself in the middle of this whole conversation. So thank you, and I'd like to hear from Sister Nicole. She's adding some 2 cents to this.
All right. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Sister Nicole, and I'm out here in the hotter, well, not so hot now today, but Las Vegas. My 2 cents is this, is that, we can call it seasonal, and if that's the name that society wants to give it, that's fine. But this is a normal mental condition of Black people that I've seen, and I don't really think it has anything to do with seasonal. I just think that it has to do with the condition that we have really been put in our entire existence of life. But the saddest thing about it is we ourselves don't know we're in this condition. So that's why I'm so glad that we have something like this, that we can get out to our Black people and say, look, it's okay. Because many of us don't even think it's okay to be considered having mental issues. You know, we want to run away from it. We want to hide from it. We want to not acknowledge it. And so then it gets the best of us. You know, it's the not really knowing that a lot of our Black people out there, Black males especially, that is committing suicide. We don't even know this. I mean, it's the lack of knowledge that we really don't have to really reach out and to say, I'm hurting. You know, so this is going to be a wonderful, that's the reason why I wanted to come on here and support this, because I said this is really going to be wonderful because, you know, our Black people don't have this type of reach out that says, look, I want to pull you from the ground and pull you up. And I want to give you knowledge and help you to understand what is going on with your mind, because this has been going on with us for years. It's in our babies now. I mean, where it's been in our babies even then, but it has gotten worse when I'm in the classroom with a lot of these babies. It's gotten worse. So,
you know, Sister, you really stirred the pot there. I'm sorry. Yeah, you really stirred the pot there. I wanted to just.
I was going to ask it. Please.
Am I on? Okay.
Please, ma'am.
I'll be really brief, but I'm appreciating what she's putting in. I appreciate what she's putting into the conversation because, you know, she's talking about, you know, us Black people in this country, but I do think that's a factor. Certainly we know that we are naturally people of the sun, right? And so we in North America do not get the sun that we are wired, right, to be able to get. I have also been reading that, you know, certainly the levels of COVID are much lower in Africa than they are here. And so I saw, I think one of our brothers who was watching, he also added into the chat about the vitamin D, and vitamin D being a factor. We do not get the levels of vitamin D that we require living here in North America. And so I do think that it creates a vulnerability. And I'm so glad that you brought that point forward. Right.
And Dr. McClure, I don't want to step on you, so why don't you go ahead and finish your thought?
No, I was going to ask if Brother Stephen knew that he could pull up in just a moment if he checked his email. Please, I can speak to that then.
Oh, okay, no problem. So we have a lot to kind of unpack here because I love the energy. And first, Sister Muhammad, I have to tell you, as someone who is in Chicago, I think it's about 30 degrees and with a wind chill of about 20. I don't want to hear anything about it's cold in Vegas at all. At all. No, just a little levity there. But I certainly think both what you all have said is important for us to kind of talk about. There is the condition that we all live in, especially as African Americans, as Blacks in this country, that is inherently stressful, to say the least. On top of, as Dr. Swift, you were saying, with COVID, the pressures of the holidays, Dr. McClure talked about, certainly the anxiety around this time. Are you going to be able to provide the stress of holidays? Am I going to buy enough? Am I going to receive enough? Am I going to give enough? All those things compounded. But I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that, again, when we talk about this particular form of depression, there are some parameters that we have to acknowledge. It doesn't mean that those other things are less than, doesn't mean that they're irrelevant. But I do want to make sure, as we kind of talk about our theme, that we stress to folks watching, there is some parameters to this very specific thing. Doesn't mean those other things don't exist, and doesn't mean that they are not impactful on us. This does mean that people need to take it seriously, that people need to access mental health services, as Sister Muhammad was talking about. we gotta break down that stereotype that folks who are of color, folks who are Black, folks who are African Americans, Hispanic, so on and so forth, don't go to therapy, don't talk about problems. That is nonsense. There is nothing wrong with us accessing those services. It does not, make us weak. It doesn't make us timid. Doesn't make us inferior. It makes us stronger because we are helping ourselves and our community as a result. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out on the table, and we certainly can unpack it. So let's open it up.
Okay, I do have a thought here. I'm thinking about just how people may have expressed it back in the day in my childhood, things I would now understand, but maybe did not understand then. For example, sometimes people might express depression in the form of a psychosomatic issue. Sometimes there may have been an aunt or an uncle that talked about arm pain or shoulder pain. They had pain in their legs. And there was another way that people may not necessarily talk about the pain in their lives, the pain around depression or anxiety, but talked about it in the form of how they're feeling it in their bodies. So sometimes we may hear, people listening to this right now might have examples of people have expressed depression, anxiety, sadness, being out of or contact with family through the form of a physical ailment. And I'm not saying the physical ailment is real, that they're actually experiencing that pain, but it's how it's. And I'm wondering if the panelists have any additional kind of insight on that, the psychosomatic issues underneath depression and how it might be expressed, within our culture.
Well, isn't it comfort? Isn't it comfort that you're talking about? It's easier for me to talk about, my stomach hurts. It's easier for me to talk about, I got a pain. It's easier for me to kind of express that and receive support around that. Certainly, within our community, and I'll speak very personally within my family and my history. That's an easier conversation to have than, I'm feeling sad in my head. I'm not there. It's an easier conversation to talk about something physical, right? And there's also a mindset that goes with that, right? There's going to be a conclusion to this pain. I'm either going to go to the doctor or I'm going to take a Tylenol. Something's going to happen, and then in a period of time, this is going to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is a little above my pay grade, but it's something that I've been dabbling in, and just kind of metaphysical understandings of, what we physically experience. And so along with what Dr. Dwayne, what you're saying, and how sometimes we have these somatic complaints, and I think Dr. Melvin is on point, that it is easier for us to kind of talk about those physical things. It's more socially acceptable to do that. But even those physical things are telling a story, right? Even those physical ailments that we complain about have metaphysical symbolism behind them. That if, for example, you're experiencing back pain, your back is like your foundation, that it's your frame, it holds you, that there is something foundational that you're experiencing that has you off kilter. And so there are these notions in regard to kind of the metaphysical significance of physical experience of pain as well, that I think it's worth taking a look at.
And also, just with the psychosomatic pain, those are attached to engrams. Every single one of those psychosomatic pain is attached to some type of engram. Something happened, but the thing is that we can never really know until we try to help our people to understand or give them knowledge to understand that it's okay. You know what I'm saying? To have to want to deal with your mental health issues, and it's okay to say it's not taken away from you. I think it's actually having to deal with the elephant in the room, sort of, kind of, to helping them to understand and grasp the fact that having a mental health issue does not take away from your character, do not take away from your integrity, does not take away from you at all. Is actually going to add to you, because in order for us to get them to even acknowledge, like, this heart pain that I'm feeling, or this back pain that I'm feeling, or this leg pain that I'm feeling, it connects to something. I need to explore that, but they don't know to explore that. So they still just take bad things. Like you said, they'll pop pills, they'll go to the doctor, and a doctor can only see or tell you, unless they're a psychologist, can only sit up here and really examine the core, the outside, but they're still not getting to the core. So therefore, you're going to keep coming back with that same issue. So until we actually can reach them and get knowledge to them, then this is where, that's why this is necessary. But this is where we will be at and stay.
Sis, could you mention, I'm sorry, Dr. Melvin, but you mentioned the word engrams, and I there's a word I understand, but I think some of our viewers may not understand. Can you just say a little more about what that means and how that connects with depression?
Okay, well, the engrams, when you're taught in auditing, is that engrams can be keyed in, but engrams is what is pretty much the blockage from your memory bank. It's kind of like, oh God, what's the word they use? Aberrations, but it's a blockage preventing you from being able to process what has happened to you in the past and to actually place it correctly in your mind so that you're able to deal with it and get through it. So that's what an engram is. And those things, and you can have hundreds of them, and they all can have psychosomatic issues to it, and be keyed in. And then you start having these pain in certain places when they start to get keyed in by other people or the environment in which you're in.
Thank you for that.
Excellent information. As you were talking, Sister Muhammad, I was thinking, boy, the uniqueness of our people, right? The strength of our people, in particular. Don't we take these physical ailments, these pains, and don't we naturally prescribe some mental health like treatment, right? Does your grandmother say things like, boy, you really need to go and lay down and rest today, put your feet up, or, you got to eat better, got to eat a little bit better, got to take, here's a little, I won't call out any remedies, but here's kind of a home remedy for this pain. I'm gonna also need you to lay down, take a nap, take a load off. Aren't those really ways that we talk about mental health and kind of well-being without kind of talking about it?
Definitely. I know for my own family, as I'm reflecting now, I would think about time my grandmother would be humming around the kitchen. And sure, sometimes that could have been a tune, that could have been just a song, or that could have been her regulating herself to make sure that she's not acting out of character with someone, if that makes sense. And I think that kind of hum that I'm talking about. And I'm reflecting, I'm going back, so my age, going back to the 70s and listening to the conversations when some of them would get on the phone and talking about those ailments to some degree may have been real. I would never know, real or imagined. But as Dr. Melvin was saying, they were ways of creating relationship around pain, sharing their pain with others, physical pain at least, a bit more than sharing what the emotional pain was behind it, or at least the ease of sharing the physical pain. And of course, the emotional pain may have showed itself in church. And if any of us kind of have seen some of those settings where people are moving into the spirit or getting excited with their praise, I didn't fully know what that was about back then. I might look at it and have stared at it. I had lived my own life some years to recognize, okay, that person has a lot of stress they're managing. And in those moments, that is one of the ways, as Dr. Melvin was highlighting, is one of the ways of knowing within the culture of how we deal with our pain collectively. Even in those moments, the other ladies may have come around that person, fanning them, creating a circle around them, putting a blanket over them. This was someone could receive care, but it's really interesting that it was done in a very communal way. This was not done privately. This was done in front of everyone. So it's kind of like I can share my pain and anguish in these moments and be received in this moment, both by other folks in the congregation as well as, totally relating. And someone probably even knows what this is about. Someone knows what that holler is about. Someone knows what this particular praise is about, and they identify with it. And who knows what those conversations led to later on after a service, where people may have whisked someone off to the back to go talk to them, sit down with them. Maybe they met with the pastor at that time. Maybe the deacons met with that brother or that sister and gave them some additional care. These are things I didn't fully understand then. When I see people get to that place spiritually, there could be any number of things going on. So what we're saying is therapy and counseling is an additional place where you can start to move into the personal work of what that is about, not just taking it off for the moment and getting rid of that stress for the moment, and then next week showing up again with that same stress. Therapy is designed to go into that issue and begin to alleviate and reduce some of that over time. And so people have their spiritual experiences, ways of knowing and expressing, and we want people adding on additional pieces through reading, reflection, meditation, counseling, therapy, and entering other forms of practice where they're engaging the kind of release and attention and relief that's needed. So someone can hear their story, and to some degree next year at the same time, they're living with that, or at least the story has impact on them if it's something traumatic from their earlier years.
Yes, excellent. I could not agree more. That sense of community, that sense of understanding. I can share this pain, right? I can share this angst with others. I think, again, going back to Sister Muhammad, what you were talking about, making sure that people understand that they can talk about this, go to therapy, process it, right? We've just historically done it in other ways, and now it's to your point earlier. Now is the time to kind of say, didn't that feel good? Didn't it feel good when you were in church and people came around you and fanned you, and you went in and you spoke to the pastor, you spoke to the rabbi, you spoke to whomever? Didn't that feel good? And wouldn't that continue to feel great, right, when you are in an environment where it's all about you in the kind of therapeutic session, right? You get to kind of say, hey, I'm here to process and unpack all these things in my life and not have to worry about your therapist's day or how they're doing in that sense.
So I just want to add to that real quick. So you're really highlighting that our ways of approaching therapy, some people could be very much taught culturally. So, for example, if someone was kind of in the spirit in that moment and they were being surrounded by others in that moment, I'm really feeling the congregational space of that release for that. And I'm wondering about people being able to access group therapy. Of course, COVID interrupts some of that, but down the road, people really be saying what group counseling or group therapy is looking like. And maybe that communal space might be the modality that is necessary for some people to move into, because they need to share in that kind of congregational shared space, because they feel like someone perhaps in that circle can identify with their experience, maybe a bit differently than a one-on-one experience of therapist-client is therapist and clients of sorts, or at least a group of them. I don't know if anyone had any thoughts on that, group versus individual.
therein is kind of like a point of distinction between whites and blacks, kind of a European-centered perspective and an African-centered perspective, where that, I know I've said this in past shows, but from our traditional way of healing involves coming together, right? And so from a European perspective, when somebody's ill, we put them away. We abandon them. We distance ourselves from them. But from an African perspective, there's a coming around, there's an embracing. When people are ill, there's a belief or understanding that there's some sort of breach in the community. And so people come together when there's that injury, when there's illness. And so I feel like you were kind of speaking into that a little bit, but that's something because we've been socialized into a European perspective, we go that direction. We don't embrace. And in so doing, we haven't gotten rid of our genetic makeup, but our genetic makeup is wired to be able to feed from the energy and spirit of others in order to extract our own healing. And we miss that when we kind of just stay in just a European way of functioning.
Well said. Well said. There is no shame that any of us should feel in tapping into what's innate to us, and what's innate to us is to be in that group, to be in that community, to rally around each other. Nothing wrong with that. I want to tap back into Dr. McClure. You were talking about that group therapy or group support. Again, that sense of community. How do we access that? Where do we go for that? Is it our church? Is it our mosque? Is it, our temples? Where do we go for that?
So right now, my first thought is how much more responsibility I'm having now in this particular moment about engaging religious traditions around this kind of work, and even the training that deacons or deaconesses or folks in congregations, whatever body it might be. And not saying that they are clinicians of sorts, but how to do some of this work and the training that's necessary in the community. Even if it's Sunday school that are beginning to move in this, or biblical lessons, or out of them moving deeper into this kind of stuff. The stories are there within scripture, if that's part of someone's background. And I'm sure we can find, I know we can find aspects of depression, anxiety, grief, loss, all scripture. And if people started seeing the stories from that perspective, they might feel more comfortable engaging it because Abraham was there. They're more comfortable engaging it because they know Sarah was also in that same place, and a number of people throughout the scriptures. So we might need to tap into the stories and the archetypes that are already in our traditions and just bring out the potential mental health implications underneath it. The stories are ripe with that kind of information if people are willing to get into it.
And I think if somebody else wants to jump in, I think the other part to this is, yes, that is certainly a place or places that we can tap in, but it's not the only, right? There's nothing wrong with our communities and our neighborhoods, our social circles, our positive social circles, that we may feel comfortable kind of having that the start of that conversation, and then those circles may encourage us to go and seek out other avenues to continue that in kind of a more maybe structured environment. But I think we can access group therapy in any number of places. There's nothing wrong with going to your social circle and saying, hey, I'm having a hard time today. Let me tell you about it, and people listening and people kind of giving you empathy. and responding, hey, in kind, here's what's going on with me. I don't know if anybody else have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, go ahead, sis.
Oh, my thought on it is getting, when you talk about us being able to access our own social circle, our own social circle is us. And 9 out of 10, a lot of times we don't even trust us to even access that social circle. So that's, it's a lot of, it's going to be hard work, but I think the first step to start with us is trying to get us to understand mental health in its entirety, and then trying to identify within mental health where they place, so that they can start understanding that, oh, I place here, I do need to talk to somebody. It's like going to an AA meeting and standing up and say, yes, I have mental health issues. I want to come there and I want to talk about it. We have to get our people to that level, because right now they're not even at that level, and they're in the communities, and we all go into our most distraughted Black communities, because in every single state in America, a Black community, because it looks the same from state to state to state. And so even going in there, you see the mental issues that we have, when you see how our people are going and maneuvering around in this world. It is actually getting them to understand. It was years ago, I think it was years 2018, when we were inviting, going out and getting women, because Minister Farrakhan wanted us to get women to come to the mosque because he wanted to discuss with them. And it was this one Black girl. And, it was so, I really, at that time, was not even experienced to really try to understand her. But she came in and she was ready to come in, but then she wanted to leave because she felt uncomfortable. Now, I can tell she was a sister that was really, really, something was going on in her mind, because she felt so uncomfortable just being around other people, not Black people, because she was Black, but she was from, the ghetto, the socioeconomic area. There was something wrong. She was like, sis, I don't know if I can be in there with everybody. And I was like, well, we try to make them feel welcome and comfortable to come in and stuff like that. But she really was nervous to actually come in and be in there. So she left. I wish I would have known more to actually pull her in and say, nope, don't leave. Let's go. Let's talk about it. I didn't do that. But she left because she just didn't feel like, and she was very closed off anyway, and walking with her head down, all that kind of stuff. So you could tell there was something going on in her mindset, that she really, whatever happened in her past, and she really needed to talk about it. It's getting them to that point. We as professionals, or people that maybe even know it, if you see someone like that, we should be. When I see children like that, I usually would go and always try to talk to them. I've dealt with, one little boy in my high school. His dad got shot and killed in the street, Dane. His mom died on drugs. He was staying with his grandmother, and now his grandmother died. So here he is coming in class. He was considered, and this was one of the students that was considered a with a 504 code, which means that they have so much emotional trauma going on in their mindset that they can't learn like everybody else. But when I was working with him one-on-one, the first thing I would have him do is to talk to me. Just talk to me about anything. I don't care. Talk to me about whatever. And he started pouring all that out. One time he cried, and I just had to not even cry. It was just so sad, so bad. It was like, oh my God, if I can take all these children with me, I'll take them. But, that was just really hurtful to see that this child was crying and did not understand what was going on with him. All of these things that is going on in our community with the Black youth and the Black, the Black adults, all of these things are going on with them. And it's actually having to go to them and say, look, you need to talk to someone. I'm seeing that you need to talk to someone. Let me help you. That's what's going to take for our people to really, is going to take the love from our hearts to go to them and say, look, I love you as my brother, my sister. I need to bring you in so that I can show you how to get the help you need.
Sister Muhammad, you're on point. I could have listened to that for the next hour. Great words. But you're highlighting something that I think we should take a second and talk about, which is trust, right? That's not something we should just kind of take lightly and say to people, oh, just trust your therapist, just trust your pastor, just trust your minister. Trust has to be earned. It really does. It has to be earned, and there has to be a willingness for people to go, you know what, I'm going to trust that I can talk to you. I'm going to trust that I can be here and be vulnerable. I'm going to trust that I can be here and be safe, right? And certainly when you have, and I love your slip of the tongue there, drama, trauma, right? Because that's what it is, right? When you come from a place where you experience so much trauma, as you described in your example, then trust is not something that's at the top of my list, because I don't want to be hurt, and I don't want to continuously put myself in situations where I'm experiencing more drama that's going to result in trauma.
Yeah. I think I'm glad that you caused us to pause there for a moment, because the trust piece is important. And so we have to recognize that, our history, right? Historically and presently, we are people who are under attack. We have targets on our back every day. And we know that, and we function like that. And so because of this experience, we don't readily trust, and probably shouldn't readily trust. We're seeing that with this vaccine, right? There's a learning that has happened, that we are in an environment where that we are not welcome, not wanted. And so I think this falls into why there's this general distrust, and particularly distrust of the medical system, which also connects with the mental health system as well. And so that's a hard one, like Sister described. That's a hard one to bridge, but it causes me to think back to our informal ways of connecting. When there's an expectation there, I expect you're going to give charity. I expect you're going to join the mosque. I expect that you're going to take this medicine. I expect that you're going to talk to me freely and tell me your personal stuff. When there's an expectation there, people tend to be leery. I don't know, because I've been here before, so I'm on guard. But what we've moved away from, again, is those informal ways of being together in healing ways. My dad recently, I was talking to him, and he was talking about the barbershop and how the wisdom really that kind of circles when men get together in a barbershop and teach the young one what the older one knows, and the young one kind of sharing things. And so there's this sharing that happens that facilitates socialization, it facilitates maturity, it facilitates connection, right? And it facilitates healing. We see the same thing in our mosques, in our churches. We see the same thing, just going to visit one another at grandma's house, right? I was recently, I don't even remember where, if I was reading something or hearing something, but it brought me back to the days when I wasn't there. I've heard of them. The days when, the women in the neighborhood would get together and just snap peas on the porch, right? And they got a big pile of peas, and they got their newspaper spread out, and they're all from different houses, but they all come to someone's porch and they sit there and they're snapping. They're not just snapping peas, right? They're building with each other. They're sharing energy with each other. I'm reminded, sis, when you were talking about, my husband is a construction worker. So he has helped me to understand, we've all seen it, that a house, when people are not in it, it will deteriorate, right? If there's no energy, my mom used to have a house in the Poconos, and we used to go visit there on occasion. I'm sorry, I'm going dead. I need I'm reaching for my charger. But my mom had a house in the Poconos. We would go there, and when it was new, we would go there more often. Then after time, we would but she was constantly, the house was almost brand new, but she was constantly fixing this, fixing the leak, fixing that. Nobody's in the house. When nobody's in the house, a house will deteriorate. We need, my point is, human energy is requisite for us. And so I would, leave with that point. Thank you. Okay.
Dr. McClure, why don't you go ahead?
So there's a meme that's been showing up for me this week, and hopefully it appears up here, but I'll go ahead and read it. It's focused on these three pieces of personality, family traits, and culture. So just reading this, trauma in a person decontextualized over time looks like personality. Trauma in a family decontextualized over time looks like family traits, and trauma in a people decontextualized over time looks like culture. So as I reflect on this, and I want to get some discussion on this meme, I'm thinking about the conversation that I'm hearing. Pieces of trauma that shows up in our culture is this generational narrative. Earlier we were talking about the psychosomatic issues of how did we learn how to talk about our pain physically and not learn how to talk about our pain necessarily emotionally. That is a learned behavior passed down from generation to generation. I think in the movie Soul Food, I think it was Cousin Pete or Uncle Pete. He was upstairs. He stayed in the back room. We didn't see him throughout the entire movie until kind of maybe the 3 or 4 minutes of the movie or so. But they would take food up to Cousin Pete or Uncle Pete, and he was kind of with the family, but there was someone that took care of him in that sense. And so the community recognized they had to take care of the ones that might be sick and shut in or might have some mental health challenges. But his sister understood, or his aunt understood, his mom understood, and someone took him in. So as this meme, if that meme could go back up, I just want to get a little discussion about what trauma looks like in our personality, what it looks like in our family, what it looks like in culture. And if anyone had any reflections on those, these three issues here.
That learned, as you kind of say, that learned, those learned characteristics, right, that are ingrained in us, as Sister Muhammad said, throughout the country, in every state, in every community, we can kind of pull that picture up. What do we expect? What do we have to deal with? How do we teach our offspring, our young? We teach them to be on guard. We teach them to not display feelings. We teach them to, kind of deal with this. And it's just kind of how it is. As you kind of put that up, that wording was powerful to me. That trauma and how it decontextualizes into a culture. That's something we really have to combat.
So when I hear the whole trauma and decontextualize, it's like I've heard people say, well, in certain circumstances, well, that's how Black people are. That's how Black people. No, that's way too easy. That's way too dismissive, and highlighting it network is ignoring the history of whatever that thing is, of where it comes from, of where that trauma comes from. So when we could just look at stress points, we could look at how someone responds to a stressor. The first person encounters the stressor and they can work through it. And maybe something within their family system has taught them that we handle stress through conversation, through dialogue. But the next family, stress might be bombastic of sorts. They're slammed doors, they're raised voices. Or sometimes people raise voices, but that doesn't mean they're angry, and it doesn't mean it's going to turn into anything. But that's how they talk in the house. Everyone else in the house, but yelling does not always equate to anger, which if we look in sometimes in the community, how are police responding when they hear two people yelling? Are they reading that as anger, or can they kind of decontextualize it in a moment and recognize maybe within a culture That's how they're working the problem. They're yelling it out. That may not be how you choose to do it, but that's how they're working through that issue. So I'm kind of really looking at not just labeling these behaviors as Black, but labeling these behaviors as trauma. Even if it shows up individually as personality, if it shows up as a family trait, or if it shows up within a culture. There's a psychologist, I believe that's his background, Edward Bruce Bynum, and he talks about kind of family systems work, but he talks about, kind of like the collective unconscious within families. If many of you think Ubuntu, I am because we are, basically the community is a reflection of the individual, reflection of the community. The community as a mirror, if the community is fractured like that mirror, then how do we see ourselves within the context of a fractured mirror? And if we're looking at that fractured mirror in terms of we know how it became fractured. It became fractured not 10, 20, 50, or 100 years ago, but hundreds of years ago. And I think this show, what we're doing tonight is we're teaching ourselves new ways of being within culture, new ways of self. We don't just stop at the church door or the mosque door or the temple door. We continue from that place and we move into shared conversation. We move into the dialogue. As Sister Muhammad, when we see someone hurt and pain, we're now more inclined to reach out to that person, recognize maybe there's a personality trauma, maybe there's a family trait, or maybe there's a cultural trauma in there that's happening to that person in that moment.
Having to get those positive traits to have as much impact and have as much power as those negative traits, I think it is certainly key. I want to touch on Dr. Swift. You talked about those peas and shelling those peas on the porch. Now I'm not going to let it slide that you said you don't know anything about that. I'm telling you, I do. I'm telling you, I do. I remember my grandmother and having to. Sorry about that, everyone. Having a bushel of peas and having to sit on the porch or sit at the kitchen table and shell those peas, right? But as you were indicating, there was conversation going on. We were talking about things, grandmother to grandson. What are you doing in school? What are you learning? What do you want to do? Those type of things. But I can remember, my grandfather and my grandmother sitting on the porch shelling peas, talking about here's what we're gonna do next. Here's the family vacation that's coming up. We're gonna plan for this or plan for that. There was that conversation, and I think if we can figure out how to advance those cultures, those traits, those family traditions back forward, then maybe we can combat some of this trauma that we've all kind of been talking about, because those were impactful healing points, at least in my experience.
Yeah. Thank you for reflecting on that. I was that in connection with what Dr. Dwayne was saying with regard to the trauma. The thought that came up for me about that kind of decontextualized trauma is that decontextualized trauma is for us equal to the internalization of inferiority, which ends up manifesting as trauma on all of those levels. That internalized inferiority on the personal level, in the family context, as well as in the culture. But you made a good point too, Dr. Dwayne, that if we don't contextualize it, when we fail to contextualize it, then it becomes, we end up misdiagnosing it or misreading it, right? The person, the people, the community, the culture becomes somehow deficient, defective, right? Something's wrong But meanwhile, it's not that, it is the environment wherein these people exist.
And just to even add in when we're talking about all of this, because all of this is so true on every single level. Adding in auditing with this, when we're talking about, this being trauma and it's decontextualized, and then it's our personality, it becomes our personality, or it becomes the family traits, or it becomes a culture. When I got audited in 2011, when I started my journey into auditing, I went back to the basic. And when you go back to the basic, you kind of knock out so many different engrams. You knock them out. And I was considered a pre-clear in 2012. So not a clear yet, but a pre-clear. And then I stopped actually going through auditing or getting myself audited. But what I wanted to say about this is that memory has life, and everything that's happening to us, sometimes it's not even us. We're dramatizing what has happened in the past to our families, because when you're in the womb, I found out that when I was in the womb, my mom and my dad argued a lot. And of course, my dad and my mom split up when she was 8 months pregnant with me, but it was a lot going on outside that womb, and which managed to put itself into my what you would say personality, but really was just trauma that I experienced. So when I went back to basic, that was knocked out. And it was like, wow, I didn't even know. There were certain things that I was saying that was really kind of, if you can really, the terminology self-hate towards self, that I was actually say, words wise, that I didn't even know that came from whatever happened when my mother was pregnant with me. But then not even that, coming out into a world that really does not have our best interests at heart. So then coming into that world, then having to compile every other aspects of what I dealt with as a child that began to come into my mindset and trauma, and then also become my personality of who I am, it became my personality of who I am right now. And going through auditing kind of helped move all of that, the anger that I may have, you have it where Black women are stated that they're dominant, or they have a chip on their shoulders. Technically, I did. Then when I went through auditing, that chip on the shoulder kind of disappeared. So now I am approachable, or we're known to be unapproachable. You know what I'm saying? And that's not just Black women, but Black people in general, most of the time are known to be unapproachable. So you have all of these type of traits, personality, and culture that manage to be defining us. So when it comes to auditing, and the way auditing works is that when I look in my class, when I was looking in the classroom and I was seeing the children, I was seeing them just go through all these different valence. And valence are different personality or different actions of others around them that has caused that these children are either going to take the stronger valence or they're going to take the weaker valence. And they get keyed in by each other. So while they're keying each other in, and you have one who will be weak and start, acting like they're the weaker person, like they're taking on whoever was this person in their lives that they don't even know of. It can be from past history. They don't even know who was this weaker person in their lives that they're taking on. So they're starting to express that because it's somewhere in their mindset. This person's action or this trauma is in their mindset to take on this type of way when another person is coming to them as the stronger valence. You see that in people, where a husband is, or a child who experienced two parents, one was beating the other one up. And then next thing you know, when this child is grown up, then all of a sudden something happened that keys that in. So now they're taking on that weaker valence where they're feeling when somebody is coming off strong to them, they tend to become tense, or they tend to become, timid, and take on the weaker valence, where the other person is taking on the stronger valence. these are not actions of that person normally, because normally the mind does not work that way. And when we see things that is out of the ordinary like that, we may see, I mean, now when you become educated, you can actually see that this is not the correct way the mind works. But from a point of view of not knowing, then you start to see, oh, well, that's that person, that's their personality, that's who they are, or that's their family trait, that's the way they were raised, or this is their culture, that's the way they are. And then on TV, it tend to just put that as this is the way Black people are out there to everybody. And so now everybody is looking at us as being very scary people.
There's
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. There's once again, you've got a lot for us to unpack. This idea of self-exploration, and that kind of channel to relief. But before I kind of put that out there, I don't want to leave something else you said, Sister Muhammad. You talked about that great example of someone coming to your mosque that was uncomfortable. I don't think that we should minimize that experience and that example, even though it sounds like she ultimately left. I think there is still something positive that occurred, right? I think when people go into an environment, a positive environment, and they are uncomfortable or have some discomfort because of their own baggage, their own trauma, the fact that they were there, that's a seed. It's a positive seed. The fact that they saw people in that mosque, in that environment, showing positivity, being welcome, that's something that may grow in the future, right? And I think we, as us on this panel, and if people can kind of see all our faces, but people are seeing folks from different cultures, from different backgrounds, educational levels, and we are expounding out positivity. People will receive that, and they may be uncomfortable with it, but now they know it's possible. They know it exists somewhere in the world. And if they know that, then I think that people can then go out and seek it and kind of grow from that in a positive way. So I wanted to throw that out on the table before we unpack self-exploration, if anybody else has any thoughts on that. Or not.
Dwayne, I think Dwayne's trying to talk, but you're on mute, Dwayne.
He's muted.
Oh, yeah.
Back on mute. Yeah.
Thank you. So I want to get into the decontextualized part, and as Dr. Monique was mentioning, in the sense that getting underneath the story. So if people are looking for a real life example, I want to add to what Sister was doing. She was giving us some real life rules. I want to add to that. So sometimes in sessions with a client, I'll ask them to take a simple sheet of paper and fold it in there. And on the left side, say they're talking about their mother or their father. You can choose. And tell me about the things about your mother that you love, honor, appreciate, or respect. And say mom's name is Sarah. On the right, tell me about some of the challenges you have with Sarah. Now, this is the same person. This is mom and Sarah in the same person. But I'm trying to help the person understand that we can still love the people that we're challenged by. Some of the traumas that might are a part of her history. They were there before, my client of sorts was born. That may have been a trajectory that was in there 10, 15, 20 years before my client was born. And I'm trying to help them understand, mom was there for you in these kind of ways. And yet Sarah, still your mom, was challenged in these kind of ways. Maybe there are reasons why she yelled, argued was angry. Maybe there were reasons underneath that. I want them to begin understanding these two people exist in one person. And so they can start to separate the person they love from the person that has that trauma in them. So they can start to understand, wow, I love mom, and I recognize that these parts of Sarah might come from a history, and that history might come from trauma, more than likely. And that trauma might be tied into the culture and the family systems, which became personality traits in her. And I want my client in that moment to understand those personality traits might also be in them, because they might come from that same stem of family trait trauma, the family systems trauma, and the cultural trauma. I want the person to see that the same people that we are challenged by are the same people that we love. And the challenges that are in mom, for example, or dad, whoever, are the same challenges that are within us. How do we take a moment to look at ourselves and see ourselves as individuals, in the sense that, hey, I love, honor, and respect these things about myself. I value these things in myself. And in the same instance, the challenges that I have. Here's how I show up. Here's how I show anger. Here's how I'm picking up on the family lineage of trauma. Whoa, I'm doing trauma just like my mom did trauma. And I'm doing trauma like grandma did trauma. And now you're seeing 3 generations of it. So if we can begin to separate and bring back together, separate and bring back together, and the ultimate goal of seeing this thing that used to be one, see it split out into these 2 different manifestations, and then trying to bring it back into the wholeness once the trauma can be kind of deciphered out or decontextualized in a sense. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad to see that some people are watching and enjoying what's being said. There's a number on the screen for our viewers. We are welcoming questions, comments that you may have, so you can call into that number with any questions or comments, and we'd be more than happy to engage with you. It looked like you were going to say something, Sister Nicole? Or no? Okay.
So just to keep it going, can Sister Nicole, can you talk a little bit more about that self-exploration that you went through, that process where you kind of felt like after doing that, you're relieved, healed of some of that trauma, some of that baggage that you talked about? Can you talk a little bit more about that for everybody? I think you might be on mute.
I went back to basic twice when I did auditing, and it was good. My mind felt light. I felt when I came out like things was processed different with me. Things seemed more, I wasn't having a headache no more. I didn't, the words that I was actually saying that was a reflection of self-hate. I wasn't saying those words because I used to say, I think say a word that was that would come to the fact of me actually calling myself, not smart, or saying like I'm stupid or something like that. And I used to say that. And when I went through auditing, what I recognized when I went to basic the first time, I was literally in my mother's womb. And I literally can hear the thing that has been stated to my mother that I used to say myself. And it was like, wow, my father and my mother, my father was not a nice man to my mother. He was abusive. And I can hear my mother, her variance. And I realized that I've actually taken on her variance, her weaker side. So when someone would come off harsh to me, I would kind of shy away or be timid, like, okay, it would make me nervous inside, like, oh, this person is speaking strong to me. And I wouldn't even understand why, like, why does this makes me feel this way? And then when I went into auditing, I kind of found out that it was due to whatever trauma that was going on when my mother was carrying me. I used to be afraid of going swimming, and I never understood. And it took me all the way back when I was in the first grade. I fell in a swimming pool and didn't know how to swim. We were in a community swimming pool. Nobody came and got me. I end up somehow managing swimming myself all the way up to the top and grabbing up to the top of it and pulled myself out. There were so many children in the swimming pool that nobody even, I went back into auditing, and that was cure. And so now I wasn't afraid to actually put my head to go into the swimming pool and actually swim and learn how to swim. At first, I didn't even know why. It was like a fear towards water. I didn't even understand why I did not want to go into the water and swim. And it was for that very moment that I realized, like, wow, I did fall in the pool when I was in the first grade, in a community pool, and all these children was in it, jumping in, and the lifeguards, they didn't even know I was in it. I could have drowned that day, but I didn't. I managed somehow. I just remember just seeing this side of the pool and actually reach my hand up and managed to pull myself up out of the pool. And I was like, wow, that had to do with the fact that I didn't never wanted to get in the water or hold my head under the water or anything. So I was like, wow. So it was a lot of things like that that started to surface, that I realized it was tied into the trauma that happened in my past life, and it changed me. So I would say try auditing. It really works. It really helps your mind to start processing things that you could not process in the past.
I hope everyone heard you when you said, because I wrote this down, my mind felt light, right? So this process of kind of unpacking trauma, of confronting it, of dealing with it, and kind of putting I'll kind of put a metaphorical period there, so that my mind felt light. Now you're able to kind of process and deal with other situations without having kind of that in the background. I just think that's a powerful quote that just know I'm going to steal from you. My mind felt light. So, Dr. Swift, what are you thinking about that?
Yeah, no, I thought she was. I thought that was. Thank you for sharing that personal story, and I thought it was pretty deep. But it made me think about other. I guess I've been trained in Dianetic auditing. I actually recently just completed a course in EMDR, and I also have a certification of hypnotherapy, which everybody, all of those three say, oh, we're nothing like anyone else. But trust me when I say they're very similar. And so I was actually reflecting on that when I was hearing you talk, because I most recently completed a certification in EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, a technique that's often used for trauma. And in that, there's a similar, what you described is quite similar. When I've used it, I've seen how people are able to process in an unhampered, fettered way. It's just, there's a clarity of processing. And I'm honestly, the literature behind EMDR shows you don't exactly know what's happening, but it works. And it's similar to what you just described. And so also with the hypnotherapy, which I didn't use a whole lot, but also recognizing with hypnotherapy that it really kind of creates the space for people to process in a way that's kind of unfettered by all the other stuff. So yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Okay.
This process, I'm sorry, Dr. McCord, did you have something?
This mic is mute.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
This process of, and I kind of started on my little cheat sheet here, listening to you, Sister Muhammad, this process of internalization of inferiority. I think we need to take some time and really talk about that. This process of looking at ourselves and thinking of ourselves as less than, as inferior, as weaker than others, and whatever the other is, and how that manifests in self-hate, in not setting high standards or high goals, being willing to achieve high goals, or willing to put that work in to be uncomfortable or be in a state of discomfort in order for us to achieve. I think we should kind of talk about that. So let me kind of open that up. This internalization, feelings of inferiority. How do we combat that, especially in our community? How do we begin to talk about that and get people to realize that is a powerful cancer, using that metaphor in ourselves?
So I want to lead in with, we've mentioned ACEs before, or adverse childhood experiences, but I want to highlight a particular meme in just a moment here, which is called the Philadelphia ACEs. And we may have even mentioned that before this. Philadelphia's graphic makeup look different, and not just because it's Philadelphia, but that there were certain issues that happened in the community that were not necessarily represented in a traditional ACEs questionnaire. So they added 5 new areas to include witnessing violence in foster care, bullying, experiencing racism or discrimination, and feeling unsafe in your neighborhood. Dr. Melvin was just asking us, what can we do to begin maybe processing or working with these issues? So one of the first things I'm suggesting is to not take the trauma and be dismissive of it, but to recognize as trauma. Sure, we say that we play the dozens or Jonan or whatever it is, and I understand that within the community. And we probably have all seen times where that has gone to its extreme. It's gotten so extreme that it's now violent. It's now 2 people snapping on. And what kind of shared trauma do people participate in where they are snapping on each other at those levels? And sometimes we normalize that and we make fun in those particular issues, but underneath it, there's a lot of hurt and there's a lot of trauma there. So I encourage people listening right now to take a look at these 5 areas and to not be dismissive of them and not assume these things are just a part of life. Witnessing violence is not a normal part of it, but for some people it has feeling discriminated against should not be a part of life, but we know that people do feel discriminated against. So some of these 5 areas are not normal things, but because of the stress and trauma of certain areas, communities, and families, these things have been made to be normalized. And so essentially we've normalized the things that are actually traumatic to who we are as people. So part of it is identifying the behavioral patterns that we participate in, being able to move past just witnessing violence, but saying, hey, I need to talk to someone about this. I need to share this story, and I need a safe place to do it. And knowing that these other 5 areas are also 5 areas that I need to talk about in addition to trauma that was everyone else experienced. So I put this meme up here for kind of anyone to speak to if it triggers anything with you.
Well, to not be dismissive, I think, what a powerful statement that is, especially around this kind of internalization. When what you've kind of put up on the screen, people need to not think it's normal to have that significant trauma, to witness repeated acts of violence and exposed to repeated acts of violence. That is not a normal condition, and we should not treat it as such, right? And so, like you said, not being dismissive of trauma. I certainly think that is one way, probably a really important way, to start combating that kind of internalization of inferiority.
What I have to say about this is it's not normal. On any level, it's not normal. But we have to look at what was as opposed to how we got to what is now today. Because if we look, and when I do a lot of my studying, and I'm studying right now of, especially for my dissertation, I'm studying of our past what got us to be having this achievement gap when it comes to us as Black people. And we know that before integration, we didn't have no achievement gap. You know, when you look at our educational history and what type of people we were before we were, we were made to think that integration was something we had to have. We have to look at what we had 30 Black women that was highly intellectuals that sat up there and helped us to reach the moon. We had the great debate from a Black college that pretty much knocked Harvard. Was it Harvard out the box when it came to the great debate? We had we had the Black Wall Street. These are not things that was going on when we were not integrated. You know what I'm saying? We were loving each other. We were building. I was doing research on a lady where she said that she was one of the ones that was chosen to be one of the Black children that go to a school. We put our children, or better yet, our ancestors were put into the school of people who was bringing on a lot of trauma. We went from having major trauma of slavery. We have to talk about that. Then we go to Jim Crow, where we were forced to be separated. But in that force of separation, we started to repair ourselves. Then somewhere down the line, we was tossed right back into trauma, right back. We weren't even fully repaired, and we were tossed right back into trauma. What child can go in the classroom and learn if they're fearful? Sitting in a classroom and thinking that just to even be in the classroom or walk down the halls, my life can be on the line. And I'm living in an air where nobody would even take regards to my life if I did get killed or hung on a tree or whatever was going on. These are not normal things. We've been witnessing violence since we came into America. Our mind is so conditioned right now, as critical race theory said, that racism is so embedded in America that it becomes the norm. Our mind is starting to think that all of these crazy drama things are the norm, and they're not the norm. So the way to combat that is that we have to go back to where the beginning was when we and start looking at that to repair ourselves. Was integration the best thing for us? Many of us don't talk about that. But, we believe in the Nation of Islam, it should be a separation because we need to repair ourselves. Separation don't mean I hate all y'all. Separation means I have time to myself to repair. I need to be able to repair who we are and what we are and move forward. And that is something we never had an opportunity to do as a people. And now you see how it has caused damage in our communities, in our family lives, raising our children. All of that is a direct craziness from the craziness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to speak to that, but I see we have a caller on the line.
Yeah, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question about some of the things that you all are saying about trauma and how these traumatic experiences shape how we act and react. But as I hear you saying that some of these traumas can be inflicted in the womb, and I've heard Dr. Swift also talk about epigenetics and how we carry and how some trauma can be a carryover. So I guess I'm just asking, as you're saying, Sister Nicole, how can we really overcome these traumatic experiences without removing ourselves from the environment that causes these traumas? I hope you all can understand that question.
So, the question was how can we heal from the trauma, although we're still in the same environment that created it? Did I understand it that way? Okay. And you were directing to Sister Nicole?
Yes, if Nicole, you can answer that first, because I also heard, from Sister Deasia when she was on as well, talk about how not being removed from a certain environment you are never, there's never really what you could call post-trauma, post-traumatic stress.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So how do we manage to heal and still be in the same environment?
Is that possible?
It is possible. It is. But we have to first start with, what is the cause of what has taken place. Separation, we can separate and not really have to focus on or deal with the environment around us. If you kind of understand what I'm saying, like we can't just leave America, and America has been the big core of our trauma that we have experienced as a people. So we can't just say, oh, I'm just going to pack up and leave. We got to deal with ourselves. We got to start having self-love for ourselves. We got to start bringing knowledge. We got to start trying to reach out to each other and know that there's an outlet for us to reach out to and start communicating and talking to each other, like group therapy. We got to start, I'm trying to,
Let me jump in there too with that. Yes, full stop. You can begin to heal and not physically remove yourself from the environment, and certainly it will be depending on what type of trauma we're talking about, right? So that certainly is a major factor. But starting that process to kind of think about and unpack the trauma, so that you can, as Sister Muhammad said, so that your mind can be lightened, so that you can process other things. There is a way to do that. As a psychologist, I'm certainly going to be partial to this and saying, by getting into therapy and having a safe environment where you can, have that therapeutic rapport with your therapist, your counselor, your psychologist, social worker, so on and so forth, and begin to talk about that, feel safe enough to process that trauma that you've experienced, so that you can find different ways to cope with it, different ways to deal with it in a positive way. That to me is one way, one part or one step to start dealing with the trauma, even though you may still be, in that physical environment, in that socioeconomic condition, experiencing, those closed doors, but you still can start to kind of deal with it.
Yeah, I
think
go ahead, sis. Did you want to finish your point?
Oh, no, I was going to say, I was going to add on, just to even add, for me, auditing was like the best thing that I did. It was that safe environment. It was going to a place where I can actually decompose mentally, and then deal particularly with certain things that has affected me in my life. But the thing is that you have to have trust and you have to be truthful. It's the two things that needs to connect when you go to auditing. You got to be able to trust a person, because you're getting ready to reveal inner stuff about you that you got to trust that this person who's receiving that is going to not to disclose. And then also you got to also be truthful when it comes to auditing, because 9 out of 10, the person that is auditing you is not going to be aware of the things and issues that has happened in your life. And if you want to deal with them, then you have to actually be truthful to the person who's auditing you, but mainly be truthful to yourself to even want to open up and let these things out.
Yeah.
Thank you. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
I kind of wanted to speak to, I'll try to be very brief, on the point of healing, in your question about healing in the midst of an environment that is creating harm and injury. I think if we have to be honest to say that, yes, healing can happen, but the injury is perpetuating as well. And so healing in that respect, I think is kind of a moving target, and we need to think about it on a continuum instead of a place that we've arrived. And so, the racism that we experience is not the only threat to our wellness, right? So, we don't just kind of get well or heal and then period. We're always in a dynamic process. Trauma is an accumulation often, especially for us as Black people. There's an accumulation of insults and injury and harm that happen over a period of time. And so we would be naive to expect that we can just kind of arrive at healing and there be no further threat to that. And so, again, I think we need to think about it, what we don't want to do, and what going into therapy, like Melvin said, and Sister saying, and what we do want to do is have those healing experiences so that we don't accumulate a load of trauma and stress that takes us down.
So I remember Dr. McClure talked about the tribe, and I definitely absolutely agree. Of course, we're social beings, and this pandemic has made it difficult for us to come together physically. So I just wanted to ask about the tribe, and as Sister Nicole was saying, that safe place. How are some ways, I guess, that we can continue to carry that out, even though we have to do social distancing?
Go ahead.
I thought it's directing that to Sister Muhammad.
Oh, okay. One of the places, like right now, we're having this discussion on social media where we can actually connect with each other. And as it stands right now, when it comes to the social distancing, you are giving parameters where you actually can be in contact with the person as long as you have your face covering and you keep a social distancing when speaking and communicating with someone. So if you needed to have some type of outlet of communication with others, it is possible, but just as long as you keep to those safer, those safety, having your safety mask on, and if you decided you want to have gloves or whatever, but just keeping to those safety measures when going out and having those type of connection with other people, as far as while in the pandemic. So just for me working on college campus, students are allowed to come on. They have certain things that they have to keep the social distancing. There's wearing a mask. They have to have that on when they're entering campus. When they go off campus, if they want to take their mask off, that's on them. So it's just following all of those safety measures, but it doesn't prevent you from still being able to go and say, you need to have this group setting and talk with each other. Or you need to, but the biggest thing is social media. I think, social media has been the most powerful platform for everybody now today, where everything is happening on social media. So this is where you actually need to be have a good understanding on how to utilize social media for your benefit.
And remember, social distancing does not mean isolation, right? I think what Sister Muhammad was just saying is spot on. Just because we have to practice social distancing as a way to keep us physically well doesn't mean that we have to be isolated, and doesn't mean we can't socialize with folks through social media, through telephone conversations, and through appropriate gatherings. So I just think that's a point that needs to be emphasized. Social distancing is not isolation.
In the 90s, the military had this commercial called An Army. I don't know if any of you remember that. It was B, and then another point, it was An Army of One. And part of the reasoning behind that was they saw the generation, like the millennials coming into the military, but saw themselves more through an individualistic lens. So what I'm suggesting here is COVID has really caused many people to reflect on their own situatedness. And I agree with what the other panelists are saying. This is not about isolation, but could be very much about a time of, I need to find regulation within myself. How many times have we had maybe codependent relationships to a degree where people are tethered to others for their own experience? This is a time to get into practice for yourself. This is a time to read, reflect, go outside, walk, exercise, engage, get what sunlight that you can get in, and create a routine for yourself that keeps you balanced, that keeps you regulated in this particular time, because some people could be by themselves, or because of COVID restrictions, they just cannot reach out to others in this time. So in those moments where you may be by yourself, engage, practice. We've heard for years of mind, body, spirit. Mind has, body has a practice, and spirit has a practice. And I encourage people to delve into those three different areas and become that army of one for themselves, so they're more prepared to, deal with however long this pandemic takes us before we can resume back to our normal connections and relationships with friends and family.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, Dwayne. You're talking about mind, body, and spirit, and the need to kind of really breathe life into that part of who we are, because I've been thinking about how right now with this pandemic, with COVID, how we are at the bottom. We're functioning at the bottom of Maslow's pyramid. For those who may not be familiar, Maslow had this pyramid of hierarchy, it's a hierarchy of needs. And at the very bottom of the needs are the physiological needs, safety needs. But at the top is the spiritual aspect, right? That's the actualization. That's how we feel about ourselves, esteem, and so forth. And basically, he purports that one needs to satisfy the lower level needs in order to be able to realize the higher level needs. And just kind of reflecting on where we are, it made me think about how this pandemic and all the tickers, we're constantly seeing the numbers, we're constantly seeing the death toll, right? All of this causes a fear that forces us to focus on those low level needs. Not that it's not necessary, it is necessary, right? We do need to protect ourselves, we do need to be safe, but sometimes we're doing it and neglecting those higher level needs that we also need to have. And so many people now are feeling very unfulfilled, are feeling very lost, very disconnected, because we're not pouring into that aspect of our being.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
I certainly want to point out, Dr. McClure, kind of what you said of return to our normal. And this really goes to Dr. Swift as well. I don't think we get to go back. I think we will kind of see a hard shift in our history, global history, when we talk about COVID-19 years from now, and we'll come back to a point where we say we did things like this in 2019. And after 2020, we did things like this, right? I don't know that we get to go back. I think there are certain things that we'll integrate, but I think there's some real change, and that piece of self-reflection, that piece, and I want to kind of get into, people's environmental theories, but this time for planetary healing, I think we're going to be studying this for a long time.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Any other points that people wanted to bring up about, because we kind of strayed away from our topic of depression and season, this being
I don't know. I don't think we did stray away from it. You know, we're talking of those stressors, that anxiety, that trust, that, oh my God, truthfulness, right? You've been able to, you know, I'm going to write your book for you. Good Lord. But I think that all factors in, Dr. Swift, to that topic of depression. You know, seasonal being very specific, but we're talking about people's experience of depression, how it manifests, and certainly ways that people can combat that and really cope with it, deal with it on multiple levels.
Yeah.
I have just one last question. And that is, being in the age of COVID-19 that we are, if each of you could answer this question, how has this period of time revealed the mental, I don't know how to say it, but the mental state of Black America? What is it that you all can say has been revealing to you?
Wow, that's a loaded question for the last couple of minutes.
Right.
I certainly will say, for me, there has been an exposure to inventory, right? And I'm gonna kind of leave that a little bit vague. Inventory, kind of your life plans, your reserves, your connections, all of the above. But it certainly has forced me personally to take inventory. What do I need to make sure that I have built up? What do I need to make sure that I have in reserve, including my wellness, including my social economic conditions? What do I need to have ready in case another, I won't say pandemic, but crisis occurs? I want to be sure that I'm ready, and it certainly has exposed me to kind of making sure that I'm taking stock of that.
I can speak to that. I think that's a great question. Okay. I think that's a good question. I think COVID has in a lot of ways kind of unveiled a lot of things that were working behind the scenes in America, and most specifically for Black people. And so, we can certainly talk about, the health vulnerabilities, the health issues. We can talk about the mental weight that we have been experiencing. One of the things that I'm seeing that, a good thing, we always talk about the stigma that Black people have against mental health, but Black people are fleeing to mental health services. Maybe the stigma, I do believe the stigma is still kind of working a little bit, but for the most part, we're seeing a huge increase in Black people wanting services, wanting to connect with therapists, and they want Black therapists. They're not just, I don't want just anybody. I want Black therapists who understand me, because something is going on because because I'm Black. So I think that takes me to the other side of things. Yes, there is this mental burden happening with Black people that COVID is kind of disclosing or revealing. But I think also we're seeing the flip side is just how significant resilient we are as a people, how resilient we have been. That, I'm seeing us maneuver in a way that we are beginning to help seek and organize ourselves. We're seeing that in our activism. That's another form of therapy. There is literature out there that shows that activism, right, is therapeutic. And so we're seeing Black people kind of come together. So another thing that I'm seeing is that activity, I'm seeing us become more unified. And I'm seeing us become more wide-eyed and aware of where the injuries are coming from. So COVID is revealing a lot of things, but it all ain't bad.
Okay, I have to agree with you, Dr. Swift. You said everything that pretty much a lot of what I was going to say, because truth come to mind to me is that it's been a revealing of truth. It's like you said, Black people are coming together. They're starting to see. It has forced everything to be revealed and everything to be put into the forefront of us and making us have to deal with it. Because in the past, we didn't deal with it. We either ignored it or we'll deal with it for a certain time, whether it be protesting or whatever, for whatever craziness that has taken place, then we just move on. And then it's just back to the norm of the way things are. Well, COVID-19 says no more norm. It has said, look, you're going into I'm taking you into a different direction where you're going to have to face it. You're going to have to deal with it. And you're going to have to either come out a winner or you're going to come out a loser. That's it. There's no middle grounds anymore. It is or it isn't.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As I reflect on that question, and I think back during the, I think it was 70s, I heard family talk about the drama and stress of the Carter administration. Then the 80s, I heard about the drama and stress of the Reagan administration. And then I heard about the drama and stress of Clinton administration and the Bush administration. And so I put it out there like this: we're up next. And so in terms of the Black community, we're kicking off the mud from our cleats, and our generation, depending on what generation people are showing up to this conversation in, not 5 years old anymore, 10 years old, 15 years old. We are now full-fledged adults, and we're wrestling with the same things that generations past have been wrestling. And so what are we going to do in this day and time when the pitch comes down towards us? Are we going to stand there, take our feet in the ground, do the work, and take a swing at the problem before us, if that makes sense? Encouraging people listening to this, kick off the mud from your cleats, dig in, and get ready, because you are next up to bat. And how are you going to deal with the drama and stress of this time is that your family addressed in generations past? It is now partly our obligation and our duty to make sure that we are involved, active, and engaged, and we are becoming engaged in social activism within fraternal spaces, within churches, congregations, mosques, and doing our own work. Going to see a counselor, therapist, and make sure that you're recognizing I cannot carry on some of the lineage of this family trauma. Each generation should drop off a piece of this and put wellness on the way. So what are you going to do when it's your time in bed?
Well said. Well said. I know our time is short. I'm looking at the ticker, but I certainly want to say to my colleagues here on the panel and everyone who's listening, from me to all of you, from my family to all of you, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy Random Friday that's approaching. And I just want you guys to hear from me that I am certainly thankful for being a part of this discussion, but thankful, to contribute to the discussion. So thank you so much.
So Melvin, allow me, if we can, in the few minutes that we have, I wanted to share with our listeners some resources that might be helpful. So was there anything more? Can I do that now? I didn't know if you have more to say. Okay. So there are 3 resources that I wanted to share for our listeners that are specific for Black people. That's another good thing that's coming out of COVID. Black people are realizing we need some culturally specific help. I'm seeing that a lot. And so we are coming together and we are doing what we need to be doing in order to create that. We are each other's medicine. So the Black Family Summit, which was actually brought into existence, or it was the brainchild of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. The Black Family Summit has started what is called the Community Cares Listening Line. And essentially it is a number that you can call at any time of the day or night, and it can connect you to services for if you just want to talk, if you want to get resources, whatever it is, they can help to be that bridge to connect you to services that are culturally specific. It is a for us, by us effort. So please call that number 1-877-719-1117 is the Community Cares listening line. We organized it early on in COVID. It was for essential workers, but we frame essential workers very broadly because according to the stats, over 85% of us were considered essential workers. We had to be out on the front line, and we may not have been in the operating rooms or in the hospitals, but we were driving buses. We were at the cash registers, right? So we're essential workers. Many of us, most of us were the essential workers. So please feel free to call. That's one. I want to also point us to the S.A.D Fund. The S.A.D Fund has a crisis text line that is specific and designed for youth, for Black and Brown youth. And it is a text service because they realize that many of our young people kind of shy away. It was more focused for people on the campus, people who are in universities and colleges, but anybody can call. And so the workers are trained in order to be able to service Black and Brown young people. So you can just text 741-741 to, text Steve to that number. Text Steve to that number. And again, that's for young people. You want to just kind of text with someone. You don't want to show your face. You don't want to, them to know who you are. You can anonymously get some help, assistance, and support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the last one that I want to highlight is the Salbona Healing Circles that were created, again, during Corona, during the pandemic, to help give us a space, Black people a space, to be able to come together and heal. The Salbona Healing Circles is the creation of the Association of Black Psychologists, of which I'm a member. And you can, if you want more information on a circle, you can email virtualhealingcircles@abpsi.org. That's virtual healing circles with an S on the end at abpsi.org. If you email them, you can get more information about how to have your own circle or how to join a circle as well. And so there's 3 minutes left. Thank you. Did anybody else want to add anything? If in those, we have 3 minutes. Maybe we can each close out with a tip on, how to manage this depression during the holidays. One quick tip, sis. Go ahead.
Oh, me first. Okay.
I'm trying to jump in. I can go first. But, well, one of the things I can say is I think that can help alleviate some of the stress of the holidays. I think Melvin said it earlier, watching social media, we build these expectations that the holiday is supposed to be a certain way. It's supposed to be, family getting together. It's supposed to be happy. It's supposed to be, and when there's deviation from that, we get a lot of distress because of that. So one of the things that I want to throw into the pot is just kind of, being aware of our supposed to be's and recognizing that there isn't any supposed to be. And especially in 2020, it's not going to look like it usually looks.
Dr. McClure, why don't you go ahead?
Finding peace in the things, finding contentment in the small things of life. I could say that as normal advice to you. Instead of the magnitude of the season, how about the most minimal of things to find gratitude?
I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and me coming from, I always got to put Allah at the head of the table, or God, or wherever names that you call, the one, the Creator. Prayer, staying prayerful, taking that moment to yourself and to give thanks to the Creator, but also, and being grateful to the Creator because you've got this far, you've gone this far. So, and it's by the permission of God. So stay in your prayers, because that is the one thing that is going to be able to keep you grounded, keep you from stressing out in this world. If it wasn't for me going, and we're made to actually do prayer quite a time throughout the day. And if it wasn't for that, I don't even know, my thoughts. So stay prayerful. Stay prayerful and study up.
That's right, sir.
That's a great way to close out. I won't top it from there. So thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.